Hey guys, and welcome to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report, the first podcast to bring you the local fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. Butch, do you feel that?
Spring?
No, I can't quite put my finger on it. I just feel like something's been missing in this show for a couple of weeks. I don't know.
I don't think so, man.
Yeah, I'm bringing sexy back. That's
okay.
That's what
That's
it
interesting.
is.
Well, it is good to have you back on, regardless of whether or not the sexy is back or not.
Right. I don't know.
Good to have you back, man.
Yeah, I miss talking to you guys.
Had some good shows.
Yeah, it has been. Downloads have been through the roof. Everybody's got their minds switched back to fishing, switched off of turkey hunting or whatever other thing that they like to do. It's heating up, man. There's a lot going on. I actually went to the freshwater side of things last week and went down and visited my brother down in South Florida, and we got on some big bluegills. I forgot how much fun that is.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot less work than saltwater fishing.
It's really simple.
Yeah.
That was a good thing about it. It was a lot of fun. But got a lot happening this week. Got some new regulation changes in place. Pretty interesting to see how quickly that came about. I mean, you guys just talked to Scott Bannon on episode 55.
He goes into depth. He goes into depth pretty good about how the speckled trout changes and the flounder changes are going to, impact our fishery around this area. Yeah,
I enjoyed listening to that show. Scott's a guy that, I've talked to him personally. He genuinely cares about the fishery, and he genuinely cares about the fishermen.
I think so as well.
A lot of times you see just, government gets a lot of flack, and a lot of it deservedly so in a lot of places. But those guys at the Marine Resources Division, they really do, in my opinion, a great job. They really do care about our fishery and what's going on. And I wasn't there for everything, but it definitely seems like the public opinion swayed this a lot. A lot of people really wanted those limits to be changed. And so it looks like they really, along with science and data, it looks like they really did what the people were asking for.
I think so. I think it's going to impact the fishery a lot. Really, technically, I'm pretty new to inshore fishing, speckled trout and whatnot. We never did it growing up. I was always a deep sea guy. The Lady Ann could not get in very skinny water to catch those trout. So I'm not sure as far as, overfishing and all that, but more little fish got to equal more bigger fish. So,
well, I like to say, I'm not privy to the data, and I wasn't at every meeting where the public did voice their opinion, but to get them to come on this show and offer to say, hey, here's my email address, here's my phone number, call me, let me know what you're thinking. There was plenty of opportunity to put your say in, and it sounds like, and just anecdotally from talking to people, we talked to a lot of people online, on social media. It really does seem like this is what people wanted. So it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see how it works out. I don't think it's going to hurt anything.
I definitely don't think it's going to hurt anything. It's got to, like I said, it's just got to help from here.
Yeah.
Excited to see what happens.
Well, one of the guys that's been fishing the waters around here for a long time and knows, I just really like talking to David Thornton, the pier pounder. He's always got a little different spin on things. He sees some things that you and I would never see when we're out there. Let's go on down and talk to David and see what's going on at the Gulf State Park Pier. David, how's it going?
Well, it's like spring is in full swing now, Joe. We got the first king of the season was caught this past weekend. A buddy of mine from Fairhope caught a 25-pounder on a artificial lure, and really he was just fishing for larger Spanish, and that nice king grabbed it.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
It is, and often that happens early in the season. A lot of the kings that come in are the bigger ones. It's like they're feeding on the small Spanish mackerel because there's not a lot of bait around the pier as of yet. A few squid and some large glass minnows, but not the big schools of alewives like we typically think of late in the spring and on into the summer. So that's coming in a few weeks, but the water temperature's still a little on the cool side, middle to upper 60s. When it tips up above 70, that's really when what seems like the bait starts moving inshore, probably by the full moon, later in April, towards the end of the month around Easter or so, we'll start seeing some bait schools moving into the beaches pretty quick, and more game fish will follow them in when that happens.
Let me ask you a question about that water temperature. When you've got a day or days where the water temperature is not quite, where you're talking about, let's say it's not quite at that 70-degree mark, do you find that fishing more towards the middle of the day can improve things? I mean, will the water temperature heat up enough with the sun coming up to move some bait in that won't be there at maybe first light and last light? Or is it really more of just a water temp needs to be a stable 70 degrees?
Yeah, it's pretty dynamic. It does the top few feet of the water column does, pick up a little bit of heat during the day, and it can vary a few degrees at least, especially if the water, is a deeper green and the sun is shining pretty strong and the wind's not blowing too hard. That water can absorb a lot of energy, not necessarily light, but the energy, heats the water up, and then it slowly releases it during the night, so it's kind of a wash. And what we look for is like a day-to-day rise in these water temperature graphs to where it's like a stair step, and you'll see it, kind of go up during the day, and then it may fall a little bit at night, and it goes up a little more the next day, and it, falls again the next night. Especially when we get these cool fronts through this time of year, that north wind knocks the waves down and makes the surface near the shore pretty flat. But it gives the sun an opportunity to really penetrate deep into that water and maybe warm the water column a little more thoroughly than it does on a day, perhaps where just the sun is out during the middle of the day for an hour or two. You're not going to have as much heating under a situation like that.
So do you think there's any value in picking and choosing your times? I'm one of those guys, and we've talked on here before about not being a spot fisherman, and that's something it's a bad habit that I have to try to break is, not just going and fishing a spot because that's where I caught them last time. And I'm also the same way with timing, like I personally, I just want to be out there at first light. I feel like if I'm not there at first light that I've missed something. Is there anything on the pier specifically or in the surf? Is there anything to, sleeping in every once in a while if the conditions are right?
Yeah, sometimes it can really make a big difference. I watch the tides, especially in the winter time. The high tide, the low tide is early in the morning, and then the tide's coming in all day. And sometimes during the cooler months, the best time to fish may be the last 2 or 3 hours of the day when the tide's getting higher and it's pulling warmer water in from the deeper Gulf. And now this time of year, sometimes the mornings start pretty good because the water is starting to kind of turn over. If you'd put it in a freshwater sense, where in a pond or a lake where it's fairly shallow, the water starts to kind of, instead of the warmer water being on the bottom, it starts to rise to the top like you would expect. And as days get warmer, we'll see more and more of that. And also the tides are starting to progress through the springtime into more of the summer mode, where we have the high tides move on into the afternoon instead of, late at night. So during the daylight hours, you may actually see the highest point of the tide. And anytime around the change in the tide cycle, or if the wind, picks up with a sea breeze or something like that, it may trigger a bite. Often of course, a lot of times morning, especially for pelagic fish, it seems like they really key off in the morning, and they break out of their holding schools that they're in during the night, and then they start running around looking for something to eat, and they may run inshore real quick, and then when the sun gets bright, they may move offshore later in the day. And so it depends on the water temperature and the clarity, how much sun there is in the sky, because they don't have eyelids or, a hat and sunglasses like we do. So their only protection for their eyes is to go deeper into the water column to filter that light a little more, so it's not as strong and they're not blinded.
I just feel like you're down there with them sometimes, David. Just how do you know all this stuff, man?
He lives with them, I think. Beast Bum was saying last week that he did a lot of sleeping in. He said the afternoon was on fire and the morning was literally non-existent.
Yeah, we had a period where that low tide in the morning, I think because the surf temperature was kind of lingering a few degrees behind what the ambient temperature was further out in the Gulf. Mm-hmm. And when high tide started pulling some of that warmer water in, Plus you've had, 4 to 6 hours of sun warming that shallow water. There may be a brief period during the afternoon and in the early evening when that shallow water is a little warmer, and those cold-blooded fish, that's all they need to trigger them into a little bit of a feeding frenzy, relatively speaking. But the fish would go on the feed and more inclined in the afternoon than in the morning when it's chillier.
It was right after the moon was full last week too.
Yeah.
David, you mentioned that 70-degree temperature mark for kings, and when I was doing a lot of cobia fishing, 67 was what I was always looking for. Seemed like to be the magic number where we started to see numbers of fish show up. What about pompano? Do you have a magic number on them, and what's been going on the pier for pompano?
Pompano been pretty steady, the last month or so on the pier as far as I should say consistent. They haven't been steady yet, though there have been some good days where they, catch 30, 40 pompano off the pier, but a lot of undersized, just like what we've been seeing on the beach, but some really good ones mixed in as well. And again, they do tend to kind of move around more and feed more, sometimes on that incoming tide, especially if the sea breeze kicks up and it starts stirring a little bit of waves breaking on the bar that may, dislodge some food items for them, and it'll stimulate them, again, because there's food nearby, and it just gets them more in the mood to eat. Probably the temperature where it really tips off is about like cobia. Their temperature gradient their temperature preference is probably pretty close to that, like in the mid to upper 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And to hang a number on it, I'd say 65 to 68, somewhere in that range, about like what you said. And by the time, like about the full moon in April, they start moving offshore to actually spawn, but they tend to stay in that surf zone. It's like they'll be using the moon, especially in clear water, as far as like for schooling and sometimes for feeding as well. And I've even heard about people catching them from the beach at night under a full moon.
That'd be fun.
So, yeah, because you know how light it is, on a clear night when the sky's clear and the winds are light and you've got a full moon, it's like 6:30 in the morning, before the sun comes up. You've got plenty of light. You can almost, you could tie a knot if you wanted to, probably in that much light.
I'll tell you
Not
this.
an old guy like me, but maybe some younger guys could, but not.
I'll tell you this much, like Angelo likes to say, my pro tip of the week is, well, one night we decided we were going to go out and catch sand fleas. We were going to fish the next morning, and I couldn't believe how much easier it was to catch those sand fleas at night. And
yeah.
I mean, we couldn't see the colonies like you can in the day. We were just literally going to the water's edge and raking at the water's edge, and we caught just all we needed. I mean, it was a little bit later in the year, but it was still April, and I think just being at night, those they were up in the sand, and I think like if you've ever tried to walk up on a colony of sand fleas, they can either hear or see you coming, and they will go down. So that's just another thing that I wonder if that has anything to do with that full moon bite. But that's interesting, David. Well, it sounds like things are starting to improve down there on the pier, and thanks for that report, man. I know we're going to get a cool tip from you this week, but before we do, we got to give the onshore sponsor, and that is KillerDock. Man, these guys, Butch, are selling the fire out of some KillerDocks right now. They are. I need to get one if you don't have one. I went and saw them over at the wharf on Saturday, and they had an awesome setup over there. I believe they sold out over there, didn't they? They did. They had a really good weekend over there. That's awesome. People are loving them. That's cool. We put a lot of time and money and energy into our fishing, and most of us don't have a fish cleaning station that we're proud of. And Butch, I mean, I know you've suffered from dock dysfunction. I think we all have at some point. For sure. I actually just texted Jay a minute ago. I said, I'm around all week and this weekend. Let's get mine put up. So hopefully we can get mine put up. Yeah, you need to get that thing fixed, man. I'm ready. No need in dealing with rotten wood or rusty metal. And like we said a couple of weeks ago, cleaning those sheep's head, literally not a scale on the dock. I couldn't believe that. You just think about when you're cleaning fish and you just end up with a belly full of, on your shirt, you got slime and blood and scales. Nothing. None of that stuff anymore. So y'all check out KillerDock. They combine durability, function, and design to uniquely upgrade your entire dock experience. Y'all check them out at KillerDock.com. David, what you thinking about for an onshore tip this week?
Well, with the water temperature still being a little on the coolish side, the bait fish haven't shown up very strongly along at the pier, and a lot of people are still using cigar minnows, and inshore guys are using frozen shrimp a lot of times. And one thing I'm thinking about is that I have an hour drive from Mobile, and I'll take advantage of that time, and I'll let my cigar minnows or my bait shrimp, just sit in a bucket in the back of the car on the ride over there, so they can begin to thaw out. I don't want to keep them in my cooler, and then when I get there, I've got rock hard, solid frozen bait to deal with. So what I'll do a lot of times is let it thaw a little bit, and especially the shrimp that I'll freeze in seawater. That salty water, when it starts to thaw out, it doesn't just dissolve like an ice cube. It gets kind of flaky and soft, and you can break 2 or 3 of those shrimp out around the edges and just keep doing that way, and you don't have to waste valuable fishing time, trying to sitting there under the sink at the pier or on the beach, dunking your bait, getting your feet wet before the sun comes up even, and trying to thaw your bait out. It's already partially thawed, and you can get started as soon as you get there.
Well, so David, you talked about snobbling.
I was actually just looking. That was our April 30 to May 6, 2018 episode.
Okay.
All right.
What episode number was that, Butch?
Episode 9.
You talked about snobbling in that episode, so y'all go back and listen to what David said there. But David, essentially, you were targeting king mackerel when you're doing that. Why would you not want to just? What's the problem with just throwing out a frozen cigar minnow?
Well, sometimes that mackerel, when he picks that frozen cigar minnow up, it just doesn't have the right consistency. It would be more like a block of wood or biting an ice cube. If you've ever tried to bite an ice cube, it's pretty hard. And that, in fact, a lot of pier guys call those frozen cigar minnows popsicles. And if if that king picks up a popsicle and bites into it, and he's expecting a nice, warm, mushy cigar minnow, and he may spit, and you pull your minnow in, and it's got teeth marks all over it, but no bites,
Snobble sickle.
That's it. They probably can, I don't know if they taste or anything like that in the conventional sense that we do, but they can, when they bite down, they certainly can feel the consistency of the bait. And if it's frozen, it's going to have a much different consistency than what they're expecting. And it may spook them, and they might spit it out. Yeah,
know that's not right. I mean, they don't eat frozen fish in the Gulf, obviously. They know it's not right.
No. Yeah. And I'm not sure if the coldness affects their mouth or anything like that.
Probably just hard, yeah.
Yeah, but it's certainly not the consistency that they're used to when they bite in on a piece of fish, and they may think it's not something edible and spit it out.
That's a great tip this week, David. Thanks for that. I think a lot of folks just overlook a lot of the little things. I know I'm one of them, and you get frustrated enough by something, 10 times of doing it that way, and you think, I'm going to take my cigar minnows out when I'm heading home, from the house.
I mean, a snobble sickle, if you lose 3 nice kings, that could be your day.
Yeah, your whole day.
Whenever your cigar minnows are too frozen, that could be your whole day right there.
Yeah, and often, and like getting back to the water temperature thing, especially with the pelagic fish, we're getting more and more into that time of year where that morning bite is pretty critical. They had a day earlier this week on the state pier where the Spanish bite was over with by about 7:30, for the most part, at least the flurry of it was. And a lot of people had their limit in that hour and a half, from first light until then. And it was like the people that arrived afterwards were just pick up one here and one there. They really had to work a lot harder at getting that bite. And, it's when the kings show up, it'll probably be about the same way. There may be some of that afternoon bite that's triggered on the wind and the tide, but a lot of it is going to be, first light kind of thing. And the more we get into the summer, the more we'll see that.
David, I know you've been bestowed the honor of being the president of the ACFA this year. And I guess 2 years, right? You'll be this year and next year. What's going on? Y'all got a tournament coming up, right, on April 6th?
Right. That'll be our second tournament of the year, and we have 8 throughout the year. It's a really fun organization. We don't fish for money. It's strictly plaques and bragging rights and just trying to help spread the word with inshore fishing and talk up things inshore fishing. And we have also, besides the the Saturday tournaments, we also have a year-round big fish contest where we track the 10 largest fish for 10 different species, inshore species. And at the end of the year, we'll crown, the champion for that, and we'll also crown the tournament champions. And one thing we're doing this year too is that we've inaugurated the junior anglers, the kids under 16, boys and girls both, have their own division, and they accumulate points and plaques on their own, separate from the adults. So at the end of the year, we'll have a separate adult master angler, and then we'll have a separate junior master angler as well. And so it's a great opportunity for the kids to get introduced to inshore fishing, learn a lot, talk to people. We have some really good speakers, Bobby Abrascato.
Some Pier Pounder guy talks there every once in a while.
That guy will talk about fishing anytime. But Patrick Garmison also, and we have a lot of other guys that come and talk. Some of the guides that everybody's familiar with, and or even on the podcast, and they'll get a chance to interact with them. Where I'm going.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and y'all have meetings first Thursday of every month. If folks want to get more information online or become a member, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Go to acfafishing.com. That the website has pretty much everything that you need to know about the club, about joining. You can join online. Even the dues are only $50 a year, and that includes being eligible for all these tournaments that I mentioned. Plus, we have door prizes and drawings at all the meetings. And then at the end of the year in December, we have our awards banquet, and that is part of your dues. That's included in your dues for you and your family.
Yeah.
And that's, the husband, wife, and any kids under 16. And this year we expanded that to also include grandkids as well.
Nice. I didn't know about the big fish at the end of the year thing.
Yeah, it's a fun banquet, and gets everybody together. We take time to celebrate the champions in each division, and also, call out the big fish contest winners.
Well, you said I get crowned. I look great in a tiara, so I'm going to hold you to that whenever I win this year.
Yeah, we'll have your name and put on it there, Butch.
Sir Butch of the Sailcat.
Crowned.
There you go.
All right, David, we'll check in with you soon, buddy. Hope you get back out there and have some good luck. Thanks for the report.
Okay, anytime. Good luck, y'all.
All right, Joe. It's always great to hear from the old Pier Pounder. Let's head on down to the Mobile Bay, Mississippi Sound Causeway Report. We'll see what Captain Richard Rutland's doing. Old cold-blooded fishing. What you say, Captain Richard?
What's up, fellas?
Man, enjoying this pretty weather, huh?
Woo! I can't get enough, man. It's just tickling me to death that there's been a bunch of sunshine and not a ton of rain, which looks like we're going to get a little bit of rain tomorrow, but it's definitely making things interesting. You can get out and get around and get some things done, you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's been a lot of fun. I've been all over the place here recently.
Fish everywhere? Or?
They are. I was just telling one of my customers, he asked me where we were going to meet, and I said, man, yesterday I fished out of Dog River, today I fished out of Dolphin Island, and tomorrow I'm going to the Causeway, so if that doesn't tell you something right there, I don't know what will, because, there's things happening everywhere. Had an incredible bull red fishing trip down at the island today.
Well, let me guess where.
Yeah.
Nah. Where'd you,
ding, 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 ding. You got
what's
it.
the pattern?
We've been down there in Dixie Bar right there off Fort Morgan Point. Really, the past couple of times, I've only gotten on these. The fish have been there for a couple of weeks, but every time I've gone out there and caught them, you can see them. You know, you can see the school. It's not one of those things where you have to set up this big monster drift and fan cast or pull live baits or anything. I just kind of ease on down the bar and start to look for fishy activity. You know, birds working areas, or you'll see some big slicks pop up and whatnot. And sure enough, you know, and one day I found a big mud, you know, like where there's like a great big muddy area or whatever. And sure enough, I slowed down and started looking, and poof, there was a school. You know, there was just, you can see the water almost turns orange, you know, like that kind of copper color, where you can actually see the fish. So it's all sight casting, which is awesome.
That's
and
sweet.
Been targeted them with grubs. Today we use nothing but Joey Landry's little slick lure, the smaller one, on a 3/8 ounce jig head, and you just kind of get near the school and cast your jig head in there, man. And most of the time, as soon as it hits the water, you have to be flipping the bail over pretty quick.
Man,
Get the reel in gear, because you'll have a fish pretty much immediately, you know. So it's really, really hot action.
Any particular color? Are they just eating everything?
Man, when they get out there like that, I don't really pay attention to color. I really think I could thread a piece of beef jerky on there and throw it out there, and they'd probably crush it, you know. So actually, when I'm going through my slicks, you know, my little slicks, I kind of pick the colors that I don't use a whole lot, that I have a whole lot of confidence in.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of throw, like I've been throwing like a motor oil looking color one all day today at them. And they were eating it, but they also ate a pink one and a chartreuse one, and then one that I guess kind of like a Cajun pepper color that's clear with red and black flake in it. So, like I said, man, I don't think color is
just
very necessary. Yeah. One thing I do is put a little scent on there. I use a Procure inshore formula, and I'll put a little bit of Procure on there to kind of add a little scent to it, and I think that helps. But anywho, it's red hot.
For the folks that aren't maybe that familiar with Dixie Bar, you know, I've been surprised at how many people are listening from out of town and will message us and say, you know, they're trying to keep tabs on things because they're going to come down for a week or 2 or 3 during the year. And explain a little bit about Dixie Bar. Maybe just tell us kind of how that bar actually orients to Fort Morgan and what to look for. Because I think that's a lot of people expect to go out there and see like a literal sandbar, you know, like above the water line. And
right
there, they don't know exactly, well, are we on the bar? Are we off the bar? So, you know, when you're on the bar, what kind of depths are you looking for? And then when you're off the bar, what kind of depths are you looking for? And then maybe talk a little bit about how you set up on your drift for those fish, or what you do depending on what you're seeing.
Okay, so just to kind of give everybody a lay of the land, Dixie Bar starts pretty much at the point of Fort Morgan, and it runs parallel on the east side of the ship channel. It runs parallel to the ship channel, and it goes all the way out past the lighthouse. It's a very, very long bar. That's at least 3 miles worth of water right there that I know of that's fishable out there. As you get on down to maybe the last 2/3 of the bar, real close to the ship channel, it's like 3 or 4 feet deep. It's an actual sandbar out there. And there's several bars that kind of, I guess you'd say, systems of bars and troughs that go back to the east. And that's usually what I'm trying to drift over, is kind of get up on top of the bar, and I'll start there, and then you'll kind of drift into a trough where it comes down from 3 or 4 feet, and it goes down to 9 or 10 feet, something like that. And then it comes right back up to 5 or 6, and then it drops off again. And sometimes the fish are laying in the troughs. Sometimes they're up on top of the bar. This go round, the fish have been all the way on the east side of the bar. And like I said, we're seeing them. You know, you just kind of idle on down the outside of the most eastern sandbar, and you'll see, like I said, it looks like a big copper. The water almost looks copper, or it'll look like a cloud or something is there. And that's the fish. Typically, when we don't have this, the water's emerald, I mean, just crystal clear down there. You got 10, 12 foot of visibility in the water out there today. But typically, I'll start up shallow, and I just let the boat drift, you know, whichever way and I'm not real picky about the tide, which whether it's an incoming or an outgoing tide. I just like a water movement period. And I'll just make a long drift, sometimes like 200 or 300 yard long drift. If I don't get a bite, I'll kind of look at my track on my GPS and I'll shuffle down about 200 or 300 yards, and I'll make another drift and shuffle down and keep on doing that till you set up, till you start to find some success. And then you start trying to make the same drift over and over again.
Man, that's a great advice. You just kind of make your lines there and cover all that ground. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and then something else Joe was to add to his question there. As far as finding fish, I just look for light.
Birds.
You look for little turns and birds, stuff like that working. And then of course when they're feeding out there real heavily, they'll create fish slicks, which we're going to talk about in a little while. So I'll look for big slicks, look for bait activity, look for birds working, and just kind of get in that general area and start working. Start making some long drifts.
For sure.
Well, if you hadn't been out there on the bar and given that a shot, this is the time of year when it's just. I mean, it can always be good, but Richard, it can just get ridiculous out there.
Dude, right now it's as good as I've ever seen it. I probably saw about 6 or 8 different schools of 1,000+ fish today out there. I mean, I literally, I think there's got to be 10,000 fish, 10,000 bull reds out there on that bar right now. I mean, it is incredible. And something that always triggers my mind to go out there and think about that is whenever the wharf boat show happens. That always seems to be something that I correlate those two things with. When the wharf boat shows happen, the redfish are usually out there on Dixie Bar. It's usually right around, sometime in March or the first part of April, like we're in right now.
That sounds fun. Those things are fun to fight on light tackle.
They sure are. So like I said, I usually grub it. I used to drag, live croakers and drift and do all that kind of stuff. And I've gotten to where I've got a lot of confidence bouncing a grub along, especially something with some scent on there. I like using gulps. And then, like I said, today we're using the little slick and adding a little bit of procure to it. But they're such scent-oriented feeding fish that I think having some type of scent is very important.
I imagine that'd be a really good application for the fish bites. They make that Fight Club version.
Big time. And that stuff works too, as good as gulp does. I really like that fish bites.
Well, what about the trout situation?
So trout situation is really starting to come together. You can tell that we're still a little bit in a transition period, because on some of these warmer days when you get up on the flats, you'll just really, really, really do well. And we'll have a little cool off, like what we're kind of coming off of right now. You'll have a little cool off and it kind of slows them down, checks them up a little bit. And so you'll go to a spot one day and absolutely just wreck them, and then come back, a couple days later after a cool off period, and it'll be somewhat slower and the fish aren't as grouped up quite as good as they were. And you just have to work a little harder. We got on a great bite south of the Mobile River the other day, in the upper part of the bay. It was one of those things where we're just making a real long drift. I'm talking about, I was making a 400 or 500 yard long drift. And every time you catch a fish, we power pole down and you maybe get one more bite or 2 more bites or something like that. And as soon as we pick up and start drifting again, we start catching fish. And so what that told me is that they were scattered. So I just kept on drifting the whole time. I quit anchoring down on them. But it's that way up there. And then the other places I've done well in trout is down Mississippi Sound, down there in Grand Bay and Portersville Bay have been very active. And seeing some of kind of the exact same pattern as far as the in correlation with the weather heating up and cooling off.
I've got a question for you about these fish when they're up on the flats like that, and you mentioned them being scattered. Bobby has talked in past shows about fish orienting to structure or fish orienting to bait. We've got this transition happening right now where these fish are moving out of the rivers. They're moving up onto the flats. When they get up on these flats like that, what are they orienting to? Are they orienting to small changes in depth? Are they just scattered at all times? What can somebody look for if they wanted to key in on something?
This time of year, I really like to try to find oyster shells, some type of shell or grass. Those two things right there are going to hold bait small shrimp and minnows and mullet and stuff like that. And I think that that's what they're orienting to are places that have one of those two components. And something I tell folks all the time, the old hotspots map that you can go buy at West Marine or Academy or something like that, and gives you layout of Mobile Bay. And it shows you where a lot of that stuff is. It'll say, okay, grass flats or oyster shell or sandy bottom or whatever it is. But those two things, the grass and the oyster shells right now, are the two things that I'm really fishing over. So I think that in correlation with the water depth, the shallower water depth this time of year tends to be a little bit hotter than deeper water stuff. That's
great, man. That's some really good stuff. You are going to answer the Hey Cap question this week. We have an old friend of ours. Vic called me all fired up about this last week. He said, I'm going to send you a Hey Cap question. I said, all right, Vic, that sounds great. So Vic Johnson asks, and Vic Johnson is going to be the recipient of that Fair Hope rattle this week. Thanks for your question, Vic. Vic emailed us at alabama@bestfishingreport.com to get his question in. When riding around looking for slicks, how can you tell the difference in an actual trout slick and what I call a phantom slick? And can you explain fishing trout slick technique?
So to answer that question, I tell you what's funny about slicks is most of the time you find slicks when you're in transit, when you're running from one place, from point A to point B, from one fishing spot to another.
Right.
And most of the time I smell the slick before I even see it. They kind of have everybody says they smell like watermelon. And once you smell one, you get a nose for it. I always kind of joke around with people whenever I smell that smell, I kind of get aroused. I always say I wish they could put that stuff in a can so I could just walk around my house spraying it everywhere,
it's about to be on.
No, hold on a minute now. I'm calling complete BS on this. This is like, I can totally see Richard out on the boat. He's like, y'all smell that slick? Like, he saw the slick like 10 minutes ago, but he's just trying to, really have some showmanship for his client. Y'all smell that slick?
Man, I'm telling you, man, I'm like,
and then they catch a fish and you're like, I need that. Let me get that tip, guys. Don't forget about that tip.
I'm like a bird dog smelling a bird in the field, man. Whenever I smell one of those slicks, I stop and point. I do.
He's up on the bow, shorts on, smelling them.
So something that Vic asked was about a phantom slick. Okay, so we have things. We have slicks all the time, and what I call them wind slicks. And most of the time you'll have like a bank or something like that, or a point. And you'll see this great big long, sometimes it looks like it's a mile long looking slick, and it's real thin and slender and long. And that's a wind slick, and you want to ignore those. A true fish slick is going to be usually round or oval in shape. And it almost has like a little bit of a different shimmer to it as well on the water when you're looking at them. But when you see one or smell one, and then see where it is, the wheels start turning, and I start asking myself questions. Okay, well, where is that slick happening? What is the water depth over there? What structure might be on the bottom? What's causing that? Because a lot of times you'll be like around crab traps or something like that, and sometimes I'll associate seeing a slick with a line of crab traps if a crabber just came by and changed all of his bait out and emptied them and put them back in the water or whatnot. And so you got to ask yourself a few questions to start out with, to why the slick is there and where it's located. And then as far as setting up on it, I like to look at where it is, take note in the current, which way the water's moving, and then which way the wind is blowing, because the fish are going to be upwind and or up current from where you see the actual slick. So you got to kind of think about it and assess the situation before you just go to fishing. A lot of people, I've seen a lot of people, they just want to go fish right where the slick is. And I'm always like, no, you need to throw up here, up current, upwind from them. And another thing too about slicks that I see a lot is I call them whiffs. A lot of times when you're on fish or in a fishy area, you'll see a slick pop up, and it's literally there for about a minute, and then it just goes right away. Some of them pop up and they they'll pop up the size of the bed of your truck. And then before you know it, they're 18 times that size, and it's real spread out and big. So, paying attention to those little things sometimes clues me in to where a school of fish might be, and I'll adjust my drift or where I'm anchored at to move over in front of them.
You're talking about those slicks, and that happens a lot out on these flats that you're talking about, whether it's shell beds and whatnot. Do you have an approach? Like how spooky are these fish out on these flats with regards to, your hull slapping the water, your
Power pole going down?
Yeah, anything that you're using, trolling motor, all that kind of stuff. How much, how wide do you need to give them a berth if you're trying to get, say, upwind or upcurrent of a slick or a fishy area?
So I always say that you need to use the lightest means necessary to get to the fish. Okay, so I pretty much always use the wind to my advantage to kind of push the boat whenever I go fishing. So you see a slick, and say you're lucky when you see it and you're 100 yards away from it. Okay, I'm gonna keep about 150 yard distance from where I think the fish are, and I'll usually make a great big loop and get upwind as far as I can, and then kill the big engine, get on the trolling motor, and then just kind of slowly drift right into where the fish are. And then when you get a bite, or if you want to stop and focus on an area a little bit, either power pole down or slip your anchor in the water and give it a little bit, and then pick back up and move along that way. Fish are very, very, very spooky in shallow water, and especially when you're talking about oyster shells, because oyster shell, if you've ever walked on an oyster shell bottom, it's as hard as concrete. You just have to imagine that every sound,
it's going to carry
every sound and everything that's happening is reverberating through the water. So it's going to be a lot more
amplified.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I got your back on Well, what about them redfish, Richard? Do they produce a slick as well whenever they start feeding pretty hard?
Yep, they sure do. Pretty much all fish create some kind of slick, I think, when they're feeding, and what's happening with that, what's causing that slick is all fish, when they eat, they're not nibbling and chewing things up like we do when we eat our food. They just inhale the entire bait directly down into their stomach. And when they do that, they inhale a bunch of water. And so some water goes in their stomach, and they have to regurgitate some of that water out of their stomach. And that's what's causing the slick, is some of that stomach acid and stuff coming out of their stomach. One thing that really tells me that that's exactly what's happening is every once in a while, whenever I'm taking a speckled trout off of a hook or whatnot, and I'm holding it there, and the fish is kind of upwind of me, I get a whiff of that watermelon smell that we're talking about from the fish. So that's why that's happening.
That's really cool. That makes a lot of sense.
It's cool. Yeah, man. I've heard, I've even heard guys that tuna fish talk about getting out there around tuna and stuff like that, and they'll see slicks pop up, and so that, you can just tell that fish are in the area and the fish are feeding. That's all a slick is telling you, that there's feeding fish in the area.
I can attest to the tuna slicks. They do have a smell, but I'm not sure that it's watermelon.
Yeah, it might not be watermelon. That's just how the speckled trout usually smells to me. But but anywho, man, that's pretty neat.
Honeysuckle. It's honeysuckle.
Honeysuckle.
Tuna fish slicks smell like honeysuckle. Tuna fish I can smell them. I can smell them from at least a mile away.
That's neat.
All right.
No, that's good stuff, man. I'm still learning this inshore game as well, and I enjoy fishing with you and fishing with Bobby. And last time with Bobby, we fished a good bit of those slicks in the Mississippi Sound, and I learned a lot from him that day.
It's something to definitely take note of. You just never know where you're going to find a school of fish, and that's just a telltale sign of where some fish are actually feeding. The bad news about slicks is they don't tell you what size fish they are. 'Cause a lot of times you'll see all these slicks popping up all over the place, and you pull in there, and it's 5 zillion 12-inch trout.
Hey, that's all right. That works too.
I still can't get the picture out of my mind of Richard Rutland or Rouse driving his boat to find these.
Ooh, man, you want to talk about fun, bro? I mean, that's that gets me fired up.
That's right.
Me real fired up.
No matter how big they are, the tug is the drug. Whenever you find fish, you found fish.
That's it. A tug is a drug. I stole that one from you, man. That's I like that saying.
For sure.
All right,
That's
Richard.
great point, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And we'll be checking back in with you, bud. If folks want to get in touch with you, I know you've probably got a few trips left, but I imagine you're booking up pretty fast. How do they do it?
Man, coldbloodedfishing.com is my website. You can find me on Facebook. My contact info is on all of those places. Drop me an email, text message. I'm easy. I'm easy. It's all. Yep, smoke signals. Yep, I picked those up too.
He smells them.
That's right. It smells like watermelon.
That's it.
All right, buddy. Stay safe out there.
All right, Cap.
Hey,
Richard.
thank y'all for having me.
Yes, sir. Keep whacking them.
All right, Butch. Onshore, inshore. Everybody knows what's next. Offshore. Let's go talk to Angelo Depaola in Orange Beach. Angelo, how was the Bahamas, man? I saw some of those photos on Facebook. Looked like you had played a little hooky this week.
Man, just a quick trip down there, did a little bit of fishing. We didn't score too much on the fishing. We raised a couple whites. The one day we decided to kind of tool around and do some lobstering and some sightseeing. The bite went off, and I don't think there was a boat that fished that didn't catch at least one billfish. But that's how it goes. It was a good time, and back at it here in Orange Beach and enjoying some nice spring weather.
Well, we talked to Patrick Ivey last week, and it really sounded like things kicked off with regards to billfish offshore. I say we. I listened last week, but Butch talked to Patrick Ivey, and it sounds like things are heating up. What do you got for us this week out of Orange Beach Gulf Shores?
Well, man, I know Patrick, guys on the Born to Run, they obviously had, the show before that, we had talked about somebody's going to get out there and have a great billfish fishing trip, and obviously, we're falling right into a spring pattern right now. Big tuna weighed in at Destin this past weekend.
Bluefin.
And big bluefin. Talked to a buddy of mine that was riding in a helicopter between oil rigs off to the southwest and saw a massive school of bluefins in open water just blowing up. So, obviously, those fish are coming in. In the Gulf, we have a quota of incidental catch that you can keep, and once we get to that tonnage, it's over. So last year, we ever go over that, but last year we went over it pretty early, and I think part of it is boats are bigger, faster, and fishermen just have gotten better, and so there's just more likely to have an encounter that's going to end up in a fish being caught nowadays. So we got bluefins. Some buddies of mine went this past weekend to the shallow rigs off of Dauphin Island, caught some nice yellowfins on the chunk. The wahoo fishing is really heating up here off to the southeast. You're getting that 200 to 450 foot range. Pull some high speed stuff or pull some shaky baits. Those guys are catching a handful of fish every day. And the swordfish bites finally starting to kick off here. A buddy of mine was out last week. Caught a couple of nice ones, lost a really big one. So it's just kind of starting to happen.
Well, that really big one term, it's kind of relative. To me, a really big swordfish is 200 pounds or more.
I saw two. I saw another one you're talking about. Nick. I'm not even going to try and butcher his last name. But there was two that big caught this week. The other one wasn't quite as big as Nick's, but it was big.
Yeah,
so they're definitely starting to show up.
That fish out of the Keys,
big.
Almost 800 pounds.
Stupid big. I can't even imagine that. I really can't.
That's a scary fish. Could you imagine really that next to your boat? That would actually, that's would be a little intimidating for me.
Can you imagine, daytime when you've got all that light to be able to see, and you look down there and you see an 800-pound swordfish?
I cannot even imagine.
I'm like Butch. A big fish here in the Gulf, or swordfish, a good one here in the Gulf is a 200-pound fish. You got a 200-pound fish, you had a good day. We get some that push that 300-pound mark, a couple every year. But for whatever reason, very rarely does somebody come in with something over 400 and 500. I'm sure there's when one or two caught. I just couldn't put my finger on it right now.
Angelo,
so when I think
you've done a lot of daytime, and have you hooked and lost any really big fish that you felt like were like real big fish?
The second time I ever did it, we hooked a fish, and the only reason I say it was in the 500-600 pound range is the trip before we caught a 591 pound mako, and both swordfish and makos have pretty similar body types and kind of density to the flesh. And this fish was every bit as big as that mako, and it would have been caught, except it was just me and one other guy in the boat. And we had the fish pretty much tuckered out. And when he bent down to pick up the harpoon, the fish shook its head and pulled the hook and just glided away. When he looked up, the rod tip was just straight. I go, dude, I'm sorry. That fish is no longer with us.
Oh, my
God.
I'd rather
have to bail off.
I'd rather one break me off or shave through the leader, just to see one just kind of shake that hook and just kind of ease off. I've seen that too many times.
Yeah. Well, Angelo, Joe and I were talking after we saw that big Nick swordfish, big Captain Nick swordfish. Dad and them Lady Ann fought one for like 15 hours one night. Joe, you probably know. You were out there. I was not out there on this one.
I believe
it like 9 o'clock, and they fought it until like.
If I remember correctly, we were on another boat out there, but they hooked that fish. I think the story goes they hooked it at like 2 o'clock in the morning and fought it until 5 o'clock the next afternoon.
Ugh. And they never saw it from the story that I've heard. I don't know.
I think there's some big ones out there. Every once in a while they get hooked, but so any big fish, so many things can go wrong. I mean, you could have everything right, and your line actually bumps up a piece of.
Who knows? I mean, you get too much sarcasm. You get too much sarcasm on the line. I've lost fish that way. Anything can go wrong. And swordfish to me is a beast of the beasts. So, catch a fish that big is incredible.
Yeah, it's good to hear they're catching them.
Oh yeah.
What about cobia, man? I mean, I know the cobia numbers have been down the last few years, and folks are kind of starting to get a little
allegedly
about it. But have any fish started to show up in Orange Beach yet?
A handful of fish. There's not a lot. I mean, honestly, guys, whenever we're talking, I'm sitting out here walking the dock, and there's like 2 boats here that have pulled their riggers down. But just to kind of give you an idea of kind of where people are at on that fishery. I mean, it's just, hopefully it'll come back. It's one of those things, I think we as humans kind of, everything's 2020 hindsight. Hey, maybe we should have been keeping 15 of those fish every day back in the day. Good thing is those fish, my guess is, they're putting some management stuff in place, and with good management, they should recover pretty quickly.
And
cobia grow pretty fast, don't they?
I think they have a life cycle of about 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, they're almost like mahi, like dolphins.
That's what I thought too. I thought they grew that fast.
And I think we do give ourselves a hard time for what we do as anglers, but Butch, you and I have been able to spend a good bit of time with a lot of scientists, and a lot of the data shows that we don't have as big an impact on some fish as we think we do. Right. A lot of it is cyclical. A lot of it is water temperatures during the breeding period, during the spawning period, and influences that are beyond your control. And you just assume that it's you. So I don't know. For me, the jury's kind of still out on cobia, because definitely that spring fishery where they're migrating down the beach, anecdotally, there's no doubt that there's less numbers of fish. But if you flip that to the late summer, early fall fishery off of Mobile Bay, out on those rigs, out on the ships and the nearshore rigs, and I mean, there's plenty of fish. Yeah, go to Louisiana, they don't they don't struggle to catch a cobia over there. So. I don't know. I'm hesitant to just jump to conclusions too much.
I just think it's changing. And I've said it before, it's just changing. What if the fish that run that gauntlet up and down, the East Coast, the West Coast of Florida, all the way up through Destin, where we typically fish like fish, what if they're just learning? What if they're like, screw that. I'm not going back through there.
Well, I can say this.
Or you could have a change in the current, and they're going up the East Coast. I mean, there's all kinds of.
Or just further offshore.
Right. Why do they catch?
Or you have a bad recruitment a year.
Why do they catch bigger swordfish off the Keys than we do here in the Northern Gulf? I mean, I don't know. I can't answer those questions, but I'm just hesitant to jump to too many conclusions without some hard data.
That's a dead horse, as we call it right now.
Anyway, well, that stinks to hear that it's not improved much, at least from the sound of things on that side of things. But it does sound like the offshore, the blue waters is getting right.
Yeah.
What about bottom fish? Triggerfish still pretty easy to come by, Angelo?
Man, every charter boat that comes here into Orange Beach Marina, they've got their limit of triggerfish, usually some beeliners, some white snapper, king mackerel mixed in with it. I know Bill Staff came in with a bunch of tunas last week. It's just kind of starting to happen, and with that, we're not that far away from tournament seasons.
Yeah,
right around the corner.
When's that first tournament?
The first one, I put out a tournament calendar magnet every year. If you want to get one, you can just go to my Facebook page, Angelo Depaola Realtor, the Coastal Connection, and DM me, and I'll send one out. And the very first one, at least in our part of the world, is actually this weekend. It's called the Kids Win. It's probably a couple hundred kids out there. It's April 6th. But the first big boy, like real fishing tournament, Pensacola Big Game Fishing Club has their Ladies' Day tournament May 10th through the 11th. Then we start off the Gulf Coast Triple Crown the following weekend to May 15th through 19th with the Orange Beach Billfish Classic. And we'll have boats, in from Texas, Louisiana, Florida.
Nice.
Out all over the Gulf Coast coming over to fish that one. I think it was like a 50, 60 boat tournament last year. And we'll be full on fishing season by then.
That's right, man.
And that's not that far. That's right around the corner.
Yeah, it's not far at all. Well, what excites me the most about what you've talked about is the cobia. What about a cobia tip, man? You got any good cobia tips on tap?
Man, I learned this trick from a guy named Max Pace. So when you're cobia fishing over here, you usually have a bucket with an eel in it. You have a rod with a jig. Maybe you got another rod with a pinfish.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with eels is they're slimy and they kind of get knotted up in your line. So if you have a bunch of lines sitting in your bucket with your bait, you're gonna have a issue.
Be wrapped around the hook.
You're gonna have a knot. And then if you have your line all taut, the eel can't really move around, and so that's not good for them either. So it's like a little clip that you would use for like sailfish fishing. You can go to J&M and talk to Carson or Steven or Andy, any of those guys over at J&M, and it's about the size of your fingernail. Drill 2 little holes into the up top near the top lip of your bucket and zip tie it into place, and you can just clip your line with just enough room for the eel to kind of swim around in your bucket, but not so much that he can tangle up your line. And when fishing's tough, you got to take advantage of your opportunities. The last thing you want to do is you see that perfect fish. He's going to be easy to cast to, and you pull your top-notch bait out, and it's a tangled mess. And
I think we've all been there.
Yeah. I mean, if you fish enough, you'll definitely been like, well, that was a blown opportunity.
That's one of those
little things.
I think my favorite part of this podcast are all these little tips, the little things that really can make a difference, because that has happened to me. That specific thing has happened to me where, I had my eel in the bucket, thought I had everything squared away, good to go. I'm up in the tower, got my rod, ready to roll, see a fish, go to pull the eel out of the bucket, and the eel is literally tied in a knot.
Lock knot,
the line. And I'm fiddling around trying to get the jig, and I take my eyes off the fish, and I turn around, and
she gone.
That something little like that can be the difference. And some days, one cobia is the difference.
That's the day. Yeah.
It is the day.
Yeah.
So, and like I say, that's a specific product made for fishing. I don't see why you couldn't use something like a clothespin,
Sure.
To just snap your line to the top of the bucket.
It sounds like
makes everything look nice and professional.
The key is that line can't slide in and out like an outrigger clip. It needs to be able to pinch that line a little bit, kind of hold it in.
Yeah,
that's right.
You could probably
you just want to hold it in place.
You could probably use one of those heavy duty paper clips that they get, where you bind a bunch of pieces of office paper together, or printer paper together.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Any of that stuff will work. But you want to keep that line in place. You want the bait to be able to swim around, so have some wiggle, a little bit of ice in your bucket. will kind of keep them calm. And then what's kind of nice is when they're cooled in a bucket and you throw them in the Gulf of Mexico and that water's a little warmer, they really get to wiggling pretty good, and that always helps.
All right, Angelo. Well, good luck out there, man. We'll check back in with you soon, and thanks for that report.
Hey, you guys have a good one, and we'll catch up later. See ya.
All right, Butch. It was good to be back this week. I really missed being here for a couple of weeks. I like talking to all these guys, and we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary of the podcast, and I genuinely feel like I learned something every single week.
Oh, no doubt.
It's a lot of fun. And speaking of fun, this week's What Did You Learn is sponsored by the 6th annual Floribama Fishing Rodeo. It's the funnest fishing tournament on the Gulf Coast. This year it's going to be May 31st through June 2nd. We already got our...
About to say, we're going to be there.
Yeah, we already got our condo booked. I'm excited about that. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Could be dangerous. No photo that week.
Yeah, they just got a cool venue over there. They got a lot of cool venues along the coast. In fact, over in Santa Rosa Beach, they got another place called Shunk Gully. You and I have hung out there.
Yeah.
I just think they do a real good job with their venues. But anyway, guys, go check this out. It's there's over 30 categories of fish. There's everything from blue crabs to speckled trout to red snapper, all the way up to the big stuff, swordfish and lots more. It's a really great way to get kids involved. It's a low entry fee, really cool prizes. Weigh-ins are there at the Floribama Old River Grill. So guys, just get out there, join the party, visit their sponsor area. They got some really good live music lined up, good food, a lot of fun, a lot of really good family environment. I'm bringing my little boy, and we're going to hang out there for the weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. More info and tickets over at FloribamaFishingRodeo.com. Butch, what do you think, man? What'd you learn?
I think that what I tied in this week was David Thornton was talking about knobble sickles, and you can lose a couple of nice fish early in the morning if you're not ready and your bait's not thought out properly. Angelo was talking about making sure every cast that you make with that eel, I like his clip tip. I think that Luke in Virginia will like that tip as well. We usually fish 2 or 3 eels up there because you might get 5 or 6 fish, and you got to present some serious baits up there. So I think he'll like that. I thought of him when Angelo was talking about that. You got to capitalize when you can. I think it's all in the details. I mean, the small little things can make a difference in a great day and a pretty poor day. I mean, you miss 2 or 3 fish, that's your day, especially when you're talking about cobia, king mackerel, some big ticket items,
Yeah, especially when you're fishing for a fish where one fish can make the day.
That's right.
I was telling you that exact thing had happened to me with the eel. That's happened to me, and the biggest cobia I've ever seen in my life. Same kind of deal. Saw the fish, kept my eyes on the fish, reached over, grabbed the rod and reel to throw a jig to it, and as I pulled that reel across the tower, the main line hooked on the steering wheel knob. And when I went to cast it, it was total bush league maneuver.
That does not surprise me with you. You're pretty bush league anyway.
I mean, I just want people to, learn
from your mistakes.
My mistakes, and there's plenty to learn from.
That's
but,
right.
Just something little like that where, hey, man, if I had just not had that rod across the tower from me, even though I'm right-handed, if I just kept it on. Anyway, some things are just going to happen. You can't prevent it all. But
you want to tell you how I prevent stuff like that?
You just don't see cobia?
Well, not around here very much, but just if you want to, specifically target cobia or trout or blue marlin or whatever your bucket list item is, not necessarily bucket list, whatever you want to get good at, man, go take Richard, go get on him on a charter or Bobby. Learn the details from those guys that do it every single day. And they know. My dad always says, I may not know how to catch them all, but I've lost them every way possible.
Right. There's
so
no doubt.
I know how to not lose them.
That's what makes this show so valuable, is that you're literally getting to tune in to these guys having tens of thousands of hours on the water targeting these specific species, and they're sharing that knowledge and that learning curve so much quicker. But there's still nothing that compares, like you said, to getting out on the water with them and just picking it up and absorbing it from them right there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Save you a lot of time.
Well, that's going to wrap it up, folks. As always, thanks for listening. Subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We surely appreciate all the downloads. March was our 12th month and our highest downloaded month to date. Big thanks to you guys for making this show a continued success, and big thanks to our sponsors for making it possible and keeping it free for all you guys. If you can, reach out to those sponsors of the show and let them know you listen and patronize their businesses. They're the ones that make this thing happen. So big thanks to you guys. Y'all keep whacking them.
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report has been brought to you by
Coastal Conservation Association of Alabama. Check them out at ccaalabama.org.
Also brought to you by Geico. Call Ron Davis, Geico agent, at 251-445-0053 or visit him online at geico.com/mobile-al.
This is Captain Richard Rutland, and this report is brought to you by Cold Blooded Fishing. You can find us at www.coldbloodedfishing.com.
And also, Great Days Outdoors, the South's finest hunting and fishing magazine. Pick up your copy wherever magazines are sold or check them out at greatdaysoutdoors.com.